Hey look, I can swivel my screen left and right and up and down. Seemingly everything in a Tesla is high-end, high technology, loaded with new futuristic designs, and that includes the screen. What this car can do from the screen is absolutely amazing. But one of the few things that still seems a little outdated is the fact that this screen is totally fixed. The several screens I have in my home, they all rotate left to right or at least up and down, but this screen remains fixed. Until today. In fact, I had the same fixed screen in my Cybertruck until I fixed that a few months ago to make it go left and right, but also up and down. This is a game changer. Here's everything that came in the box. It's really split up into the bag of hardware and then everything else, all the little plastic shrouds and casings that hide everything. You have everything you need, including the tools. All right, so this kit did come with some directions, and they're actually colored, and it's 3 pages of full directions, but they're a little ambiguous or not like the best pictures in the world, so I'm gonna walk you through how I figured it out. So one thing I'm gonna do, and anybody should do if you're messing with anything electrical in the car, is go ahead and power the car down first. So from your main screen, you're gonna hit that little car icon in the bottom left, bringing up the menu. You're looking for safety. Once you click safety, you're gonna scroll all the way down to the very bottom of this until you're looking for something that says power off. Once you click power off, it's going to ask you to confirm. You're going to click, sure enough, power off, and you'll see your screen go dark. So first things first, you're going to use this little pry tool quite a few times throughout this process, but you got to peel off this little black plastic housing behind it. One thing I thought was funny is the directions refer to this every time as a crowbar. Okay, so I'm over here in the passenger seat, which I feel like is a lot easier to do this because obviously there's no steering wheel here in my way. So I'm going to take you up and under behind this little screen. So this little screen here, this little part here, it's kind of like a actually plastic screen material. That whole little rectangle is going to pop out. I'm going to use this with the little tool. But be careful because as you pop it out, on that is attached as a little sensor, which is actually the temperature sensor. It's reading the temperature in your vehicle. So you want to be careful to pry it out, yes, which is going to take a little bit of strength, but not so aggressively it's going to fall or potentially yank those wires out. The little tip of this pry tool is going to fit perfectly inside this hole, but I am going to have to work it a little bit. So as you can see, as I'm prying up, I'm also pushing this tool slightly to the right. That was a big help. And as it's cracked open, I can just ever so slightly pull this down and it comes loose. But as you can see there's your temperature setting on the back. So obviously now the next step is to go ahead and remove this sensor. So as you look in close here, there is a little tab that you'll have to depress to get this little wire out. I'm gonna use a little pocket knife. So while I'm using the tip of my knife to push this tab in, I'm also pushing slightly up. This helps separate the wire from its little housing at the same time. Ultimately, I'm gonna have to remove this temperature sensor because obviously I'm gonna reuse this, of course, but I'm not gonna reuse this little panel here. The next step is we're actually gonna take 2 bolts now down, straight down out of the bottom of this. And what that's gonna do is actually those bolts are holding this whole screen onto the car. So once I'm able to pull these 2 out, I can actually begin to pull the whole screen out. And then when it starts to get real. So let me take it back underneath here and we'll locate the 2 bolts we have to take out. And in this particular kit, it includes you the wrench you need to do it. So using this provided wrench, I just backed out each of these screws one by one. They were pretty tight initially, but once you got the initial break plus maybe a turn or 2, then you could get them out by hand. So now the next step is to actually pull the screen off. And those are the only 2 bolts holding it on. Now in my experience, it's a little tricky to get off. So you have to kind of like shake it back and forth while you're actually pulling out, but that's all normal. As anticipated, it didn't just fall right out, but also it wasn't really hard either. You have the screen open, where it's going to look like this. This isn't the next step or anything, but you can begin to see where this little device here, which is going to be the actual swivel part of the mount, can actually start to go in here where it's going to go. So it's going to fit in there, something like that. Again, to me, that kind of helps seeing it all, how it's all going to come together. But now, nonetheless, what actually is the next step is I have to get these wires off the bracket. So I actually find it easiest to actually flip this entire screen upside down. So here you can see, even with the wires attached, you can flip this either on its side or totally upside down. Either one, as you can see, it's a lot easier to get to these wires here. Okay, so before I pull these 2 wires out, I've got the screen set here on its side. I do feel like it might be easiest to remove this little plastic shroud first. You can do that by there's 2 more little bolts with a Torx head that are coming in like this, but I'll take them out from the top. Let me show you in here from the back how that's gonna work. So you can see here on the inside, that's 1 bolt we need to take out. Then all the way up here up top, there's the other bolt. Forgive my shaky picture here as I'm holding my camera with my offhand. With 1 bolt out, you can see it's already a little bit looser. And now for that second bolt back in there, I'm gonna slip this. And again, just like the other one, went ahead and backed this screw out just the same. Now, obviously, I can't remove this whole shroud yet because the wires still run through the center of it, but I can actually move it back, as you can see here, to make more space to see those wires. But now I've got this little shroud here pushed back so I can see where I'm trying to get these wires out a little bit easier. It's always tricky for me to get my fingers in there and pull these wires out because I've got these fat fingers, or like my mom says, big boned fingers. So I always grab a pair of needle nose pliers, and these always seem to make my job a little bit easier. And here's a good example of where those needle nose just fit perfect in to pinch that little clip I need to pull out that gray cord. Now this one on the left has this little white around it. That white is just protecting this little shroud, so I can just pull this and it comes all the way out. Then the same thing, I use my needle nose to pinch in this little purple wire, the little tab needed right there, and the whole thing pops out just as easy. Okay, so now I'm totally done with this little shroud here, so I'm just going to store this safely somewhere in my garage. I'm not going to use this going forward, but I'll still want to save it. Next, I am going to need this little temperature sensor. If you remember, it was on this little piece that was the first thing we pulled off down below. So I'll be able to pull this out with those two little screws there on the end. Using this little torque wrench that was included in the kit, I'm able to back out both these screws, and I'm left with this little temperature sensor. So now that same temperature sensor I just took out, I'm going to reinstall in the little piece that actually came in this little kit. Now this can only go on one way. That little piece there is going to fit exactly right in here, and when it fits right, the two holes match up perfect for you to put those same screws you took out of the old one back in here and back in here. So back in the same way they came out, same screws, same tools. You're just tightening the same temperature sensor on this little new shroud or little housing. So now I've got the screen. I'm going to take this little piece that I came with the kit. It's just going to go back over the top of this, and you're going to use the same two screws you took out earlier. I'm going to put them back in. So just like what we did with the temperature sensor, same two screws I took out earlier, it's going to screw this little part back to the screen. Now I have this little bracket here. I showed you earlier how it kind of fit down into these little brackets here. That's where we're going to put it. And there's little nubs you can see here. This little nub there is going to keep it from going in too far, and that nub needs to be in the down position. And it's going to slide right down into these each separate brackets. All right, then once you have the bracket on like this, you're going to take the two little screws you took out of there earlier. Now they're unique because they're tapered down at the bottom with that little hex head, and these are going to screw back up through the bottom again, just the same way that you had them taken out. So since we are using the same bolts, of course we're using the same tool. Again, these all came in the kit. I'm getting these all reasonably tight because they are holding your screen on, but no need to over tighten them. Now I'm going to take the screen and fit it back into place over the top of it. Now you'll see there's two little gaps right there on the back side of it. Now those two little gaps right there is what this bracket right here is going to slide into. It's just going to slide right on top of there. And when I originally put this bracket in, it seemed a little stiff, so I felt like it was probably a pretty good idea to like work this back and forth a little bit before you actually put the screen on, because once you have the screen on, you're working it back and forth, but you're actually gripping onto the screen, and it was just a little tighter than what I would liked. And once I have this bracket here fully into place, then I have to put on this little shroud here because this has no opening in it, so I'll have to slide this on, because if I put the screen on first, then obviously I won't be able to get this on. So I'm going to slide this into place and make sure I'm feeding the cords in through this little gap, and you'll see these little holes right here are actually going to fit with a screw that's already in, which I'll show you in a second, is going to fit kind of in that and actually hold it in. So those two hex head bolts that we just put in are actually what are going to catch on this mount and actually hold it in. Again, you'll kind of see here, these holes here are we're going to hook on those bolts. So now I'm going to put in this little housing, this little shroud. Now it has to kind of fit through these wires, of course, see there, but I have to kind of move it back and forth to kind of get it on either side of this little bracket, kind of to the left first and to the right, and then I'm just pushing this all back in. Now, once I get it in tight, that little hole there is actually going to cup around the edge of those hex bolts we put in earlier. As you can see there, those are what's going to hold the little mount on to the housing. All right, so now this little piece here, which has that temperature sensor on it we rebuilt a minute ago, this is going to go back into place. Those little two nubs in the bottom are actually going to go on the bottom of it. It's going to go in just like it takes out. So as you put this in, you're going to catch it on the bottom lip and it's going to flip back up into place. But of course, we're going to plug that little wire in first. So there's going to be three wires, remember, these two larger ones and then that temperature one. So these larger ones I'm going to hook up out of the way for a second. Then I plug this temperature back into the temperature sensor itself. Once that's into place, I'm just going to put this in again, feeding those nubs first, and it clicks when it's in. Okay, so now I'm going to take and hook the wires back to the part of the screen here, which is sitting in like this. I'm going to plug these in first before I head and slide this on. I used a needle nose again just as I pulled them out to push these each separately back in. And now that I have those two wires plugged in, it's really just a matter of just sliding the screen onto the mount. Here's a little split screen for you, so you can see this pushed on both from the front and the side at the same time. It's just a matter of lining up those brackets and pushing it in. All right, now that the screen's back in, it's hooked up, and as you can see there, it actually did come on. Good news. I just have these two little bolts left. These are the ones with the little hex head on the end. The same thing, just like you took out, I'm going to put them back up through the bottom. And since I am reusing the same bolts, I can reuse the same included tool. I'm going to get these tight, but nothing too crazy, just tight enough to where it's not going to rattle around when I'm trying to adjust it. And as I mentioned earlier, you are still going to have this piece, which actually it's two pieces clipped together with that little temperature screen on there. I'm going to store these somewhere safe in my garage just in case I ever have to put this back to its original place. But otherwise, I don't really need this part. And just like that, we've got a swivel screen. Let's come on in and take a little closer look to see what she looks like. So from the front, it's going to look exactly the same once we swing around the back. So you will notice it has this little bonus knuckle. But if you didn't know better, you would think this is what it looked like when it came out of the factory. The only real difference I noticed right away is that it is out just a little bit more, but I don't really see that being a problem. Now, this is what they call the 2.0 bracket or the 2.0 swivel mount, because the first one they made, which originally for the legacy Model Y, which was what, 2025, somewhere around there, it sat a little bit lower. And that was a big complaint a lot of people, including myself, had. Well, this one does not do that. It sets right at the exact same height, just out a little bit, which again, I don't really see a whole lot of downside to that. In fact, if anything, it feels more immersive, like an experience that it's right there in front of you. Okay, so here I'm showing you with the camera right in front of my face. My seat sat back in a normal driving position. So as you can see, I can still clearly move this with one hand, which to me is important that it's the right level of flexibility. It's not loose enough it's going to bounce around while I'm driving, hey, my cat. But also it's easy enough that I can move it with one hand. Really convenient. So for a real quick recap, positives and minuses, start with the minuses. So the only downside I really see is it is a little tricky of an installation if you've never done anything like this before. But that being said, this was still under a 20-minute whole install for me. Now, this is now the third different mount I've put on a Tesla, so yes, I have some experience, but this is actually just as simple, maybe not a little simpler than the one I put on my Cybertruck. The other potential downside is it sticks out a little bit farther. Now, to me, that's also potentially a plus, but the only downside of it sticking out a little bit farther, if you're to set your phone down here on this wireless charging pad, because the screen is out at you a little bit more, it kind of cuts off a little bit more of what would be the top of your phone screen. So if you're trying to watch your screen, which again, you're not really supposed to do, while it's in that charging spot, it does cut off a little of that screen. For most people, I'd say 90% of people, that's a non-issue. But just so you're aware, it does cut that off just a little bit. But on the flip side of that, to me, it's a little bit of a positive that's out that little bit more of a 3/4 of an inch to an inch, because you can reach it easier, and it gives you that little bit more of a, what I call an immersive experience. It's right up on you a little bit more. That inch does make a little bit of a difference. And then the last upside is the whole reason you're buying this is you can actually swivel it now. And for what it's worth, it has the same probably degree of rotation I've had in my previous ones as far as left and right, but it has a much larger window of rotation up and down. My Cybertruck screen does not rotate quite to this extent, which is nice if you're on a trip and you're traveling and there's a glare on the screen. You can move the screen in such a way that that glare comes off. Really pretty cool. Or even if like you're just hanging out trying to watch a video while your car's charging, something like that, you can drop it all the way down, recline back in your seat. If this is something you're interested in, I'll leave the link down in the description below. As always, you can jump on there and get it. If you use my channel name Charisma as like a promotion code or discount code at checkout, you'll get a significant discount off your entire order. As always, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.